This is the Geostatistical module. I call it Geostatistical Appraisal. This is, as I mentioned earlier, the spatial aspect of statistics with its own challenges and benefits that come into play. It's also highly related to the misclassification ellipse we just saw. We'll see how that's used in environment, mining, and other industries. It's near and dear to my heart because it was developed in the mining industry, and therefore that was kind of my first love, so to speak, statistically. Now, I came across this great quote, I thought, from John Glenn. He said, "I can see the whole state of Florida just laid out like on a map." And here we can see the state of Florida from space, which we've only had that opportunity to have space photos in the last 50 years or so. And he was up there in his little capsule, which I don't think I could ever do. But he saw it. And he said that in 1962 when I was, doing geostatistics in the 80s, 90s, and beyond. I thought, wow, there was a time when people didn't see this stuff, and there was a time when we didn't have Rand McNally, where we could look at the shape of Florida on a map. And then my kids are going to say, wow, there was a time you didn't have GPS, I'm feeling old. But it was an interesting concept because it got me thinking, because I was dealing in the reliability of data and the reliability of data on a map, because miners were producing maps of where the ore was and where the ore was not. And I was starting to do maps of where the contamination was in the environment and where the contamination was not. And I could tell there were errors in those maps. Okay? And the statistics told me there were errors in those maps. Now, of course, if I knew where they were, I'd fix them, but I didn't. And so I was trying to reconcile all this, and I got to thinking, it's kind of like going out on a hike, and you've got your contour map from the USGS, and you're walking toward the cliff, which is straight down, and it's getting dark, and you don't have a flashlight, and you're saying, what if this map is wrong? It's like, oh my gosh, what a concept. I mean, we trust maps, because we have satellite photos, we have GPS, Rand McNally, and so on. But what if that map is wrong? And then I got to thinking, well, that's all I do all day. I make computer maps. What are those maps that are wrong? And sometimes the mines call us up and say, hey, our maps weren't right. We used your software. What's going on? So that's a problem because that's my business. And how do I fix that? And so it was a very fundamental question, a long way around from John Glenn. But I had to go to the map and say, all right, so what do? I start with sample data. I've got a facility which has got a big source area, you see by the big red dot, and then a couple of monitoring wells show that contamination is spreading down gradient toward the southeast. Then we have a couple of monitoring wells on the edge of the property, about 4 of them that are showing clean. Everybody knows what's going to happen. Eventually these are going to turn up dirty. But where is the boundary? Maybe the boundary of the facility is actually in here, okay, somewhere. And we want to know, when does the plume cross the boundary? When does it get off site? How do we make that decision? What do? Well, we probably make a contour map. Okay? Aha. Beautiful. Computer made it. What could be better? Garbage in, garbage out, they say. Okay? It's worse. With the computer, people say garbage in, gospel out. The computer did it. Okay, so now we live in a time where we become so confident in what computers can do because we have smartphones and blah blah blah. We trust them, okay. But if your data are not good or just insufficient, then we really don't know. Who's to say that this 2,000 part per million contour line really follows exactly where the computer said it did? Okay, I wouldn't trust it completely. And why do we suddenly get this little dip, okay, out here? Why? The data didn't dip. Did you see the data dip? I didn't see the data dip. The computer thinks the data dips. Okay, is that an error? I don't know. It's certainly interesting. So all of a sudden you start worrying about your maps, and you should to a certain extent. So what do? Sometimes we make a fancier map and say, okay.